Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at the best deck in the 2006 format, and if it's not the best deck, it's at the very least one of the most annoying decks to play against. Now, that is going to be PowTar, or if you prefer, BombTar. Now, the original concept for the deck is actually given to Ross Cawthon, who ended up second place at Worlds in 2005 with a variation of the deck. In 2006, the deck was largely given up on until Worlds rolled around and Sebastion Crema took a different variation of the deck to a top 32 finish after going 8-0 in Swiss. I think some of Sebastian's friends helped with the deck too. I think Mikey Fouché might have been involved with that, but either way, Sebastion gets a lot of the credit in 2006 for the deck and some of the innovations, taking it from the 2005 format to the 2006 format. Fast forward until 2018, 2019, a couple of years ago, and as the 2006 tournament started rolling around again, Graham Westby took the deck, and I will say took a very modern approach to the deck and gets a lot of, if not all of the credit for the very modern approach to the deck. Now, this first list I'm going to show here, this is Graham's list. I only changed a couple of cards in it because, to be honest with you, I think it's pretty darn close to being a perfect list for it. So I did as much as I took, and I think it was probably 56 or 57 cards. I wanted to make sure that I gave Graham the credit for it before I jumped over and talked about a few of the different cards and the list that I went with. So this is Graham's list. Switching over to my list, it's going to be nearly identical. We went with a 4-3-3 Dark Tyranitar line. I did strip that rare candy and then that extra Dark Tyranitar out of the deck, and I'll talk about the reason for that in a minute. But essentially, in most games, you're only going to need 2 Dark Tyranitars. Some games you'll need 3, and if you really think you're in a situation where you need 4, you do have a single copy of Pokemon Retriever here. We do throw in that extra copy of Larvitar for a couple of different reasons. The first is it combos well with our very high swoop teleporter count, so if we open Larvitar and need to swoop it out to a different basic, we're able to do that. And then at the same time as well, it also helps with the prizing. So if we prize a Dark Pupitar or a Dark Tyranitar, that's highly unfortunate, but at the same time too, prizing a Larvitar can be a lot worse because that'll only leave us 2. If we prize a Larvitar when we play 4, then we still have 3 in the deck, and we should be all right with that. We end up playing a 2/2 Electrode EX. Now, this is where the deck really, well, not only the namesake of the deck, but also where the real strength of the deck comes from. If you read Extra Energy Bomb, it doesn't sound super, obviously getting 5 energy back is good, but giving up 2 prizes sounds very expensive. The trade-off for that is you have a Dark Tyranitar, which in all honesty is probably very comparable to a Pokemon EX. It has an it can do a ton of damage, has a lot of health, and only gives up a single prize. Going along with that, it has 3 different attacks. All 3 attacks are situationally incredibly useful. It basically feels like you're playing an EX that only gives up 1 prize. So when you're playing something like Electrode EX, giving up those 2 free prizes doesn't really hurt as much as you think it would, or even you've seen other decks like ZRE or Turn 2 Zapdos. So the main strategy of the deck is pretty simple. We are going to get some energy in the discard pile, use Extra Energy Bomb, throw some energy under a Dark Tyranitar, and then that gives us that's going to give us access to cards like POW Hand Extension and putting our opponent in a really tough spot with Rocket's Adamant. Pretty simple and straightforward game plan, but the deck is surprisingly disruptive for being so straightforward with it. And the reason for that is, well, kind of multifold. One, Dark Tyranitar gives you a ton of different options to try to win the game. You can either try to just spinning tail your opponent until you're taking multiple prizes in a single turn. You can use Bite Off or Grind to take care of very large threats. And the real strength of the deck is you can activate Electrode, force your opponent to take those 2 prizes, and then you can admin them down to a 4-card hand. This can be incredibly disruptive because essentially your opponent's only going to have 4 cards probably get disrupted by POW, and then try to fight against a Dark Tyranitar with multiple energies under it. It's a really, really hard feat to do. Now, to set this all up, I play a single copy of Jirachi from Deoxys, and I play Jirachi from Hidden Legends. Now, this is something that Graham went a little... Graham just played 2 straight Jirachis. I ended up splitting that, going a 1 Jirachi, Deoxys, 1 Hidden Legends. The reason for that is I don't think the deck doesn't really need a whole lot. You basically just want your Electrode and you want your Dark Tyranitar, and beyond that, you're usually happy. And then having that ability to go make a wish to just evolve up through your lines fairly can be incredibly strong in some situations. Now, obviously, the risk is when you're playing a single copy of both, you do have a chance of prizing it, and you could find yourself in a pretty bad spot if you really need that Wishing Star and you don't have access to it. But in the games that I've tested, I really do like this split, and it's worked wonderfully for me. Play a single copy of Lapras. We go very heavy on the Transceiver Mentor line to make sure that we're getting those good early starts. That Lapras helps us get a supporter if we need to. And on top of that, we play a high count of swoop, so we can just swoop it into something a little bit more useful. Play a single Lunatone Solrock, make sure we're shutting off those Pidgeots and Macargos. The entire idea of the deck is we're disrupting them. And if we're going to Rocket's Admin our opponent down to a 4-card hand, if they're just able to use Quick Search on the following turn, it's not nearly as disruptive. So we want to make sure that we are being able to shut off that Pidgeot, being able to shut off that Macargo. For Rocket's Admin, this is just so strong in the deck because essentially you want to try to Rocket's Admin your opponent to 4. So essentially what's going to happen in a lot of games is you're going to kind of go along the first couple turns, try to be discarding some energies, and then you're going to use extra energy bomb, put your opponent to 4, try to Rocket's Admin them to 4, put those energies under the Dark Tyranitar. You're going to take a couple of turns. Opponent's finally going to muster enough to knock out that single Dark Tyranitar. You're going to bring up a second one, use Electrode EX, put your opponent down to a single prize, put more energies under a second Dark Tyranitar, and then you're going to admin your opponent to a 1-card hand. And they're going to have a really, really hard time fighting out of that against a fully powered Dark Tyranitar where they can't use Quick Search or Smooth Over. So, go very heavy with the whole engine. 4 Transceiver, 3 Mentor, 1 Adventurer, 1 Scientist. And the point of this is kind of multifold. The whole Mentor really helps us set up, able to grab those early basics. We really want to, usually at the start of the game, grab a Larvitar, a Voltorb, and then one of our Jirachis, usually the Wishing Star Jirachi, sometimes a Lapras. Even in the mid game or late game, it's good to grab, like, say, a Lapras, set up our Lunatone Solrock lock. Mentor is just very strong, helps us discard the energy. I play 1 Adventurer, 1 Scientist. The Adventurer is pretty much, in my opinion, I think they're both given, but I've noticed a lot of variations of the deck do not play Scientist. I do think it's worth playing that copy, even when you're trying to constantly admin your opponent to a low hand size. I do think it's worth it to play that 1 copy of Whole and Scientist, just because there's going to be times in the game when you are going to be able to Scientist for a large number of cards. 1 copy of Elms. This is where Lapras comes in. You can Mentor, grab the Lapras, following turn grabs the Elms. Elms is going to grab the Electrode EX. Just so incredibly strong. Now, I will say, if you saw in Graham's version, he played 2 Voltorb, 3 Electrode. I opted just for a 2-2 line. And that's kind of giving a nod to the Hidden Legends Jirachi because I can search out the Electrode EX. I'm going to say in my testing games, this has not hurt me at all. The third Electrode is certainly nice, but I've had no issues playing 2 and then freeing up a spot for something else. 4 copies of POW. POW is just so strong because you can either POW up something your opponent's trying to build up on the bench and knock it out before it's really a threat to you, or you can POW something active that can't hurt you and you can just spinning tail around it, like POWing up a Macargo, or something like that. So POW can be used very offensively. I guess there's multiple ways to use it offensively. 3 copies of Swoop. Now this seems a little high, but Swoop is just so strong in this deck. You want to make sure you're getting those good starts. The other thing is if you're playing against an opponent that's trying to pick off your Voltorbs, what you want to be able to do is swoop something into a Voltorb and then evolve into Electrode in the same turn, and then use your extra energy bomb. That 3 copies of Swoop is just so strong. 1 Pokemon Retriever. You want to be able to send things back, grab an Electrode out of your discard pile. There's just so many different uses for it. You can even use it in some situations where if you play Lapras, swoop out the Lapras, then you can grab that Lapras back. Now, I play 1 copy of Rocket's Pokeball. I like to be able to have something to search out a Dark PowTar or a Dark Tyranitar after I play my supporter. If I play a Scientist, an Adventurer, an Admin, I really like to be able to search something out after that. So the 1 copy of Rocket's Pokeball, it's been a nice little addition to the deck in my opinion. 3 copies of Battle Frontier. Now this may seem a little counterproductive to the deck, because, you know, why would you play Battle Frontier when you're already playing Lunatone Solrock? And there's a couple of different reasons for this. The first is both Meta Knight and Dragtrode can be very, very difficult matchups for the deck. So that Battle Frontier, ideally, you're going to be able to Battle Frontier them, admin them to a low hand size, or even that point when you're going to admin them to a single card, you're going to try to keep that Battle Frontier in play. You're going to try to lock that in and ideally win the game off of it. The second reason is a lot of really good LBS players are starting to play very high copies of Space Center. And I feel comfortable saying that because I've seen people do it on TCG1, so I don't feel like I'm giving out any secrets there. But essentially, if they play a single copy of Space Center and you don't play a counter stadium, your Lunatone Solrock just gets shut off. And if you're playing against an LBS deck and they have Pidgeot, you're probably just going to lose that game. So I think being able to play the stadium not only helps that Dragtrode and Midnight matchup, it also layers you a little bit against Pidgeot in case you prize the Lunatone or Solrock. And then lastly, it's in there to help bump annoying stadiums such as Desert Ruins, Holin's Cursed Stone, Holin Ruins, and then absolutely Space Center. So all around, just an incredibly good card. I also was playing a game earlier today against Rocklock. It was really nice to be able to Battle Frontier and then evolve my stuff back up if they have Dark Ampharos in play. So a ton of different uses for that tech spot there. Energy, we went with 15. Now, I'm going to say I think you can get by with 14, but I think you really want to see energies early and often to either be able to attach them normally or be able to discard them off your Holland engines. So 4 dark energies, pretty much a staple. You want that bonus damage off Dark Tyranitar. Things like Bite Off, you're going to be 130 damage is great, or I'm sorry, 120 damage is great, but you're going to need that bonus damage if you want to try to POW knock out a Blastoise EX, or sometimes you want a Spinning Tail and knock out the active. Getting that bonus damage in from the Darkness energies is really key in that situation. For Scramble energies, absolutely, we're going to be behind almost the entire game. This is going to be one of those decks where it's like, we're losing. Oh, oops, we accidentally won the game. And those Scramble energies are going to be a huge part of that. Gives us really access to really huge grind attacks. Gives us access to Bite Off relatively easily. And there's going to be some games where maybe our opponent just takes the first prize and we're just going to Dark Tyranitar, Scramble, Spinning Tail. We don't even need to worry about the Electrode EX. But Scramble energy, incredibly strong in here. 3 heal energies, serves a couple of different purposes. One, if our opponent tries to do anything clever against that Dark Tyranitar, like let's say they have a Stantler and they're going to try to confuse us, it can be very strong there. The other thing that I found to be very useful is if you're using Jirachi. Now, you can Wishing Star, and then if you stay asleep, you can attach that heal energy to wake up. You can also Wishing Star for your turn, fall asleep, heal energy, retreat, and then make your plays, like let's say bring up a Dark Tyranitar, and then use extra energy bomb and go from there, where otherwise you would have had to wait a turn because you couldn't have gotten the Jirachi out of the active spot. And then the last thing is something I want to point out too. There's going to be situations with Swoop where you want to Jirachi, fall asleep, swoop into a Voltorb, evolve into Electrode, and then use extra energy bomb, and that's another way to get that Jirachi out of the active spot. And in some situations, just healing 10 damage is really strong against some decks. 2 hole in FF, 2 fire energy. Dark Tyranitar's only real glaring weakness is that weakness to fighting. The whole NFF Fire Energy combo helps us get around that. It makes certain matchups like Ryax, for example, go from an auto loss to a decent matchup. So we want to have access to that, shutting off our weakness. I will say, though, some matchups where some fighting decks are still very annoying to play against, even playing that whole NFF package. Things like Nidoqueen or Ryax can be very, very difficult for the deck to play against. So just because we play that whole NFF package doesn't automatically make those matchups free wins. But it does give us, I will say, it takes it from being like maybe an auto loss or very unfavorable to even a highly favorable, depending on the matchup. So what makes BombTar so incredibly strong is the fact that your opponent can't really do anything to counter you. They can't intentionally let you take the first prize to activate their scramble energies, because you can force them to take 2 prizes with extra energy bomb, and they're always going to be playing from behind. They can't not take a prize, so POW hand extension activates, won't activate. You can force them to take those 2 prizes, and you can force things like scramble energy on. You can force things like POW on, where other decks like Mulok, for example, your opponent does have some level of control on when those cards actually get activated. And same thing with Rocket's admin. If they know they're very vulnerable to admin, they can play a different way. But with a deck like this, you're just going to force them to take those prizes and then activate admin. The biggest mistake that I've seen players make is playing the deck is, I feel like they want to get too much out of extra energy bomb. You know, they're like, well, I don't want extra energy bomb. I'm only going to get 2 cards, or I'm only going to get 2 energy, or I'm only going to get 3 energy. Extra energy bomb, don't necessarily always think of it as I've got to get 5 energy to make it worth the 2 prizes. Think about how that's going to affect your game state. If you're going to be in a better game position because you use extra energy bomb, use extra energy bomb. Don't worry about the prizes for it. Don't worry about getting max value out of that extra energy bomb. I was playing a game the other day against Chuck, and he was playing Nidoqueen, and essentially he had a Nidorina with a double rainbow on the bench. On my 3rd turn, I go extra energy bomb, and I think all I got back was a scramble energy and a dark energy. But I was able to put that under a Dark Tyranitar, attach to dark energy for a turn, POW up the Nidorina, and then knock it out with Bite Off. So even though I only got 2 energy off of the extra energy bomb, that put me in such a better game state situation because I used Electrode EX. Like, I just completely took out his only real threat. It was worth those extra 2. It was worth giving up the 2 prizes to get that game state advantage. And there's going to be some situations where you just activating your scramble energies to spinning tail or do this or do that or activate that POW hand extension is far more valuable to you than getting a ton of energy back. So that's always something to keep in mind with the deck. The other thing you do want to keep in mind is you don't have any ways to get anything out of the active spot. So be careful playing stuff like Lapras down or things down in the later stages of the game that could possibly hurt you. If something like a Lapras gets stuck in the active spot, your only real way to get it out is going to be to double retreat it or to try to swoop it into something that has a lighter retreat and then get it out from there. So just a few different things to keep in mind with the deck. I will say the deck does have a pretty high learning curve. I feel like it's one of those decks you can play poorly and still do okay with, but it's not something like... It is something where you really have to understand your deck and really understand what your opponent's deck does and what they can do to really get the most out of BombTar. But I will say this is easily a tier 1 deck and arguably probably the best deck in the 2006 format. I will say I think there's a couple of different things you can do with the list, but I will say most BombTar decks should be within about 5 cards of this list. Debating, like I said, a few spots in there, but every BombTar deck should be within about 5 cards of this. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this shed a little bit more light on arguably the best deck in the 2006 format. And if you haven't had a chance to play the 2006 format a lot, I really recommend it. It is an absolutely amazing format to play, an absolute blast. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.